I want to start by drawing a line because this episode is about emotional marketing. And I know that for some of you, that phrase already has a slightly uncomfortable feeling attached to it, as we've all been on the receiving end of emotional marketing done badly. The kind that uses fear to rush a decision, that creates a false sense of urgency, that leans into shame, quietly suggesting that if you haven't bought this yet, you're behind, you're missing out, and that everyone else has already figured this out and you have not. You have felt it, right? That particular discomfort that you feel when someone is clearly walking you rather than talking to you. When the empathy in the caption feels performed rather than genuine. When the countdown timer runs out and then resets, and then you realize that the scarcity was never real. That version of emotional marketing is not what we're talking about today. What we are talking about today is something completely different. Emotional marketing that tells the truth in a way that lands, that makes someone feel genuinely seen before asking anything of them, that honors the intelligence and sensitivity of the person on the other side of the screen. That is not tactic, that is integrity, and it happens to be far more effective. Welcome back to Strategy Sessions with Jessica Mae. I'm Jessica Mae, and this is the psychology behind the purchase. In the previous episode, we talked about identity and how people do not just buy the best products, they buy the products that reflect who they are and who they are becoming. If you haven't yet watched or listened to that episode, I would recommend please go back and listen to the episode and then come back to this, because in today's episode, we are going to go one layer deeper, because identity does not activate itself. It needs a trigger, and that trigger is emotion. Here is something the brain does that most marketers or business owners do not know or choose to ignore. People make decisions emotionally and then justify them logically. This is not a marketing theory. This is neuroscience. The emotional brain, specifically the limbic system, processes information significantly faster than the prefrontal cortex, which is the part responsible for rational thought and analysis. What that means in practice is this. By the time someone is sitting down to properly evaluate your offer, to read through your sales page, to compare you to a competitor, or to weigh up your price, your offer against their budget, the emotional decision has very often already been made. What they are doing in that analytical phase is not really deciding. They are building a case for what they already feel. This is why a perfectly logical sales page still loses sales. Why a brilliant case study does not always move someone. Why clear pricing, strong deliverables, a detailed breakdown of what is included, glowing testimonials are not always enough. Because if the emotional signal at the very beginning was off, the logic never gets a fair hearing. Think about the last time you left a website, even though the offer was technically good, and you probably could not explain why. Something just felt off. Or perhaps the last time you bought something very quickly with little deliberation because it just felt right. You were not being irrational in either cases. You were just being human. And this is also why you cannot fake it. If your marketing is emotionally flat, technically correct, but somehow lifeless, people feel it. They might not be able to name what is missing, but they keep scrolling, because people are not just evaluating your product or services, they're responding to how your brand makes them feel in the first few seconds before they even consciously decide to pay attention. This is not something to be afraid of. It is something to understand, because when you truly understand how emotion actually works in the decision-making process, you stop trying to convince people with logic alone, and you start communicating with them in a language that the brain actually responds to. For the kind of audience most of us in this space are working with, so purpose-driven founders, Christian entrepreneurs, people building something they genuinely believe in, there are 4 emotional states that come up again and again in the buying journey. I want to name them honestly, not so that you can target them, but so that you can speak to them with the care that they truly deserve. The first is the desire for transformation. As I said previously, your audience are not buying a service. They're not buying a program or a strategy session or a course. They are buying a version of themselves that is more aligned to who they are or who they are becoming. That desire is deep and it is often unspoken. They will not always say it out loud, but underneath every inquiries, underneath every DMs, underneath every moment that someone hovers over the buy now button, there is always that one question that keeps repeating over and over at the back of their mind. And that question is, will this help me become who I'm trying to become? When your marketing honestly reflects that, when it speaks to not just what you offer, but what becomes possible, it resonates at a level no feature list ever could. The second is the fear of losing money and time. This one holds so many good people back from making decisions that could genuinely help them. And the reason this is so important is because it is almost never about the money itself. It is about what the money represents. For example, the investment that did not deliver, or the course they completed and still felt stuck, or even the mentor that they trusted and who let them down. Your audience is carrying that history. They're not coming to you with a blank slate. They're coming with evidence gathered over time that investment does not always work out. And your marketing needs to acknowledge that fear with empathy, not dismiss it or ignore it or pretend that it is not there or even use it as a leverage. No, but genuinely hold it. Demonstrate that you understand what it truly costs to trust again. The third is hope. I want to say something about hope that I think easily gets missed. Hope is not naive. Hope is not the same as wishful thinking. Hope is the emotional experience of seeing a version of your future that feels genuinely possible. And it is one of the most motivating forces in human psychology. When your content shows someone a realistic, honest, achievable version of what could become possible, and when it does that in a way that feels true to where they actually are and not where you wish they were, something ignites a kind of forward pull. That is hope. And if used truthfully, it is one of the most powerful things your marketing can offer. And the fourth is a need for safety. That feeling that if I go with this person or this program, that I will not be left alone with a decision that I cannot make, that I will be guided, that if something was to go wrong, someone will be there, and that this relationship does not just end at the point of purchase. Trust is built from safety, and safety is not often communicated in your guarantee or your refund policy or even your return policy. Those things help. It is communicated long before the sale, how you consistently show up, how you talk about the people you've previously worked with, how honest you are about the things that you can and you cannot do, how human you allow yourself to be in your content. These four emotional factors, transformation, fear, hope, safety, are not a formula for manipulation. They are a map of what your audience is actually carrying. And when your marketing speaks to where people currently are, rather than where it would be convenient for them to be, everything changes. I want to talk plainly about the difference between emotional resonance and emotional manipulation, because I think the line matters, especially in the spaces that we work in. Manipulation uses emotion to bypass judgment. It creates a sense of urgency that does not reflect reality. It leans into shame, the quiet suggestion that you're behind and that everyone else has figured this out and that waiting means losing. It overpromises transformation in a way that sets people up for disappointment, and it uses fear not as a way to illuminate the truth, but as a way to pressure a decision. These tactics work. I won't pretend that they do not. In a short term, they can drive conversions, but they also erode trust. They attract clients who make purchases from fear rather than genuine alignment, and build a business on a foundation that does not hold. And for those of us who are building something rooted in purpose and integrity, the cost goes beyond the business. It goes against who we're trying to be. Resonance, on the other hand, is different. Resonance uses emotions to tell the truth in a way that lands. It says, I see where you are. I understand how this feels. I've been there before, or I've worked with people who have. And here is what becomes possible when something shifts. That is not manipulation. That is honest communication that respects the full humanity of the person you're talking to. Practically, what does this look like? It looks like leading with empathy before you lead with anything else, not as a technique or a preamble before the pitch, but as a genuine starting point of every piece of content you create. Before you think about what you want to communicate, ask yourself, What is my audience feeling right now? What are they carrying? And can I speak to that first? This can look like sharing your own real experiences, including the hard ones, not as a performance of vulnerability because you've been told that vulnerable content converts, but because authenticity creates safety. When you share something that was genuinely difficult, something you learned the hard way, or something that you're still figuring out, your audience feels seen. And when they feel seen, they trust you more. This can also look like creating content that you felt compelled to share, not content that was scheduled because it's a Tuesday and, Tuesday is is educational content day, things like that. Trust me, your audience, especially this audience, has good radar. They have seen the performed version of empathy. They know what it feels like when someone is being strategic with their vulnerability. When your marketing is emotionally honest, they lean in. But when your marketing feels like a technique, even a well-executed one, they step back. The goal is not to be more emotional. The goal is to be more true. Let's make this more practical. Think about your last piece of content, a caption, a video, or an email. When you wrote it or recorded it, what were you starting from? Were you starting from what you wanted to say, what you wanted to teach, what you wanted to promote? Or were you starting from what your audience was feeling? Those are very different starting points and they produce very different content. Content that starts from what you want to say tends to be informative. It delivers value, no doubt. It is educational, and there is nothing wrong with that. But it often stays at the surface of what moves people. However, content that starts from what your audience is feeling is different. It stops the scroll not because it is clever, but because it's true. It makes someone feel seen before it makes them think. And feeling seen is one of the most powerful experiences a piece of marketing can create. Here's a simple example. 2 different captions for the same piece of content. The first one starts, "Here are 3 reasons your marketing is not converting." This is direct, informative, and useful. The second one starts, "You've done everything right. You show up consistently. You give value, and people are still not buying. And you're starting to wonder if the problem is you." Both communicate similar information, but the second one starts from an emotional truth, from the private thought that your audience are probably thinking but never said out loud. That is the one that stops the scroll. The question to carry away from today is not how do I make my marketing more emotional? No, it is how do I make my marketing more honest about how my audience is actually feeling? Because when you start there, the emotion is not added. It is already there. You're just giving it language. Emotion is not the icing on your marketing. It is the whole cake. It is the language that the brain responds to before anything else gets the chance to land. And when you use it honestly, when you communicate from a place of empathy and truth, it does not just drive decisions. It builds the kind of relationship that keeps people coming back. Before I let you go, here are 3 things I want you to take away from today. First, before you write any piece of content this week, pause. Ask yourself, what are your audience feeling right now? Not what they need to know. What are they carrying? Start from that place. Second, lead with empathy before you lead with pitch. Demonstrate that you understand their emotional reality before you ask them to do anything. This is not a technique, it is respect, and it changes everything about how your content lands. Third, let your own emotion show. The content that moves people is rarely the most published. It is the most honest. The post that was written because something was true, not because it was scheduled. Trust me, your audience knows the difference. In the next episode, we are talking about trust because here's the pattern I see regularly. Someone engages with your content for months. They save your post or they respond to your messages. They open every email you send, and then you launch something, but they don't buy. They go quiet or they say that the timing is not right. If this has happened to you, and I suspect it has, episode 3 is going to answer a question you've probably been sitting with for a while. If today shifted something for you, I would love to know. Please share your comments or your thoughts in the comment section. Also, be generous. Don't gatekeep this information. Share this with another founder who you know will benefit from this. Subscribe and follow so that you don't miss an episode. And if you're looking for a community where this kind of conversation keeps going every single day, I want to invite you to join the Christian Entrepreneurs Marketing Network. It is built for Christian entrepreneurs and purpose-driven founders like yourself who want to grow with integrity, clarity, and strategy. To join, go to jessicamaemarketing.com/SEM network. SEM is spelled as C for Charlie, E for Echo, M for Mother, then network. So that's jessicamaemarketing.com/SEM network. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next episode.